Hey everyone, if you want to make your own podcast but you don't know where to begin, Spotify for Podcasters makes it super easy. They've got everything in one place, it's totally free, and you can make money while doing it. Here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start doing it today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and pretty much everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also supported, and you can even conduct polls and Q&As. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, the platform is totally free. No catch, totally free. When I wanted to start my own podcast, I did not know where to begin, and I didn't think it was even possible. And Spotify for Podcasters made it happen. They made it easy, they made it quick, and I am doing something that I love. What more can I ask for? So if you're interested in starting your own show, you can do it, and I highly recommend you give this a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Everything Kratom, the podcast about anything and everything Kratom. Great to have you with us on this Tuesday morning. Hoping all is great with you. So today, I found an article in the Ohio Springfield News Sun. It's a newspaper in Ohio that was covering Kratom, and specifically covering Kratom around the recent bill that passed in the House, and that would be House Bill 236, which would create a Kratom Consumer Protection Act. That passed earlier this month, and now it's headed on to the Ohio Senate. So, why do I want to cover this article? Because I think I've already talked about Ohio once before, maybe right after this passed, which is great news. But the reason why I wanted to cover this one is because for a local newspaper covering Kratom when, it's being looked at in its legislature of that respective state, which we've covered a lot of these articles before in that category, this one didn't do half a bad job. This one actually, I think, grasped the complexity of perspectives around Kratom when it comes to how dangerous is it, how accessible should it be, and how did we get here, and where are we going? So I think that it's worth pointing out because I feel like when there's good reporting on Kratom, it should be hoisted up just as much as the bad reporting should be put out there so that people know about it. There is one major thing missing from this article, which I'm going to get to in this episode, so you have to listen to find out. Ha ha ha. But we'll get to that. So let's take a look. And of course, the link to this is in the description of this episode. Here we go. This article starts off by kind of setting the scene. It talks about how Kratom is a $1.3 billion industry in the US and growing, which I did not know. That is huge. And there are researchers that are estimating that about 300,000 Ohioans use it. And so that is also huge because that's like 1 in 40 Ohio residents use Kratom. That's pretty high. I mean, I haven't looked at the ratio of other states, but I would think that's, I don't know. I wouldn't have guessed that. Maybe I would say 1 in 100, 1 in 40. Wow. So that's a pretty substantial estimate. So this is affecting a lot of Ohioans. And then the article, of course, mentions research remains thin on Kratom, but health authorities have urged use against it because it's linked to multiple deaths over the past few years, as well as seizures, liver damage, withdrawal symptoms, and respiratory depression. Several states and cities have banned it. So all that's fairly typical. Then it goes into how this House bill is passed, and a little bit of interesting information. So we kind of all know, or those of you who have listened to this podcast should know, that the House passed this bill. It was 82-9, so it's a pretty substantial vote for the bill. And the congressperson who's kind of heading this effort, Congressman Lips, he said that it's unusual for him to seek additional regulations on things like this, but two factions requested rules for Kratom: manufacturers and users. I like that this article covered that. That's the first thing I wanted to point out. they're covering the fact that this is actually happening not because the legislators are just pulling this out of nowhere, and not because the AKA has asked them to. This is coming because of the requests directly coming from both users of Kratom and manufacturers of Kratom. The two parties who, in most cases, when you're talking about regulation, would be less likely to be like, oh yes, please regulate this product and make it more difficult to produce and more difficult to just buy anywhere, and yada yada. Like, I think that it's worthwhile pointing out the fact that this is coming from manufacturers and users requesting that it happen. That is good. I'm glad they put that in there. Then it says that the Ohio Board of Pharmacy is looking to legislatures for direction before considering its own restrictions. And it turns out that this had been introduced in some form previously, but it was delayed before really being introduced to the House for 6 months so that the House Health Committee members could tour a Kratom processing facility in Columbus, Ohio, and meet with customers. So that's also cool. Like, it seems like these people did their homework. Why am I trying to point this out to everybody? It's cool because, and it's good that the paper's covering this, because you're not seeing this act come out of nowhere, and the people who voted overwhelmingly in support of it, 82-9, aren't voting that way after reading a paper about Kratom and making a decision. They're voting that way because they actively delayed the vote for 6 months, went to a facility, toured the facility that processes Kratom, and met with customers who buy Kratom, and that's what informed them before they looked at this bill. That is how you do politics, people. Like, there you go, on the ground. Hell yeah, that's the way to do it. And I think that it's really important that people understand when something like this gets passed, it's not falling out of the sky. This is the first time where I've actually seen the process laid out in any article covering a Kratom Consumer Protection Act. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been out there, and I haven't been following this stuff that long, but it's the first time I've seen it, and I really like that. So, hell yeah. Moving on. Then it mentions a report. 2018 report from the Ohio Substance Abuse Monitoring Network found that about 70% of users in the Akron-Canton area injected Kratom, and 30% would take it orally, such as in tea. I have never heard of anyone injecting Kratom. How do you do that? How do you inject Kratom? That's crazy. I'm going to look into that more. I know nothing about it, so I can't really speak to it other than, what? Okay, moving on. So then, it goes through the things that are being considered in the act. It's pretty much, standard KCPA stuff, Kratom Consumer Protection Act, so I'm not going to go into that. Criminal penalties for violators, creating licenses for processors, yada yada. Then it talks about it's really cool. This article, if you go to the website, it has a video with somebody who actually owns a smoke shop, and this person whose family's from India, and normally I wouldn't be mentioning something like that, except it's relevant because he ends up saying that Kratom is actually something that's popular in India and his whole family uses it. And he sells Kratom in addition to a bunch of other things at this smoke shop. And even though Kratom is only a fraction of the store's merchandise, quote, now it accounts for 40 to 48% of their business. So that's a fair amount of business. Makes me really buy into that idea that 1 out of 40 Ohioans use Kratom. So this is really affecting a lot of people. And, it also means that this business, half their business relies on Kratom. So, very neat to gain that perspective. Then it goes into this last part of the article, and then we're getting to the point where it's missing something. The last part of the article talks about the history of studies and FDA complaints and the proposed Kratom ban that almost happened and all of that stuff. It points out, this whole idea that the Ohio Board of Pharmacy is basically just going along with the FDA, and they cited the FDA's conclusion, we feel confident in calling compounds found in Kratom opioids. 2014 study found that more than half of regular users develop severe dependence, both physical and psychological. It cited 3 cases of withdrawal symptoms and 1 case of liver damage suspected to stem from overuse of kratom. Then in 2017, FDA identified at least 44 deaths linked to kratom, although all of them had potent substances in addition to kratom or was adulterated. Going on down, right? National Institute on Drug Abuse in 2019 cited earlier research that 11 deaths were associated with kratom between 2011 and 2017. Even the more recent research is citing old research. Anyway. Also, it says all but 2 of those cases involved other drugs, including antihistamines, alcohol, caffeine, tranquilizer, fentanyl, and cocaine. But, move those aside. Kratom. And then it gets into Ohio in particular. Between 2016 and 2018, the Ohio Department of Health found 15 unintentional drug overdose deaths in which kratom was mentioned on the death certificate. So I like that they're saying, not that, I've always been very truthful about the fact that, I don't want to cover up any bad things about kratom. If there's something bad, I want to know about it, and everyone should. But what I like about this is that it's not saying these were kratom-related deaths. They're saying these are deaths where kratom was somewhere mentioned on the death certificate. That doesn't detract or take away from anything, or any potential relationship with the death in kratom. But what it is doing is not putting that stigma on it that this happened because of kratom. Just saying kratom was mentioned on the death certificate. That I'm okay with. Go for it. You can mention that. You can also mention that someone had a breath mint in their mouth when they died. But, it means something different when you say it was related. So I'm fine with that. I think it's great. And it's also not covering up any negativity, So overall, I feel like this article is just kind of doing a balanced job of showing the bad and the good, and a bit of the history and everything. This is the end. It talks a bit about heavy metals, salmonella. Based on the data it examined, the Board of Pharmacy concluded kratom has a high potential for abuse, has no accepted medical value, lacks safety for use under medical supervision, and poses a public health risk. Kratom has been banned by all these different states, yada, yada, yada. So it has all of that. And it ends up referencing studies all the way up until 2019, 2020. And it talks about all the times when kratom almost was banned and then public comments, came out and stopped it. The thing it's missing, it does not mention this World Health Organization decision. Why is this thing being avoided by everyone? If anyone looks up kratom who's trying to write an article on it, it doesn't take long to figure out that the most recent major thing that's happened with kratom in terms of potential negative thoughts about, banning it in any way, shape, or form with the FDA, which is where everyone's going to look if they're trying to write an article about kratom and they don't know anything about kratom. They're going to look to the FDA. The thing they'll find is the World Health Organization decision. Why is that not mentioned anywhere? It's this thing that's being avoided. I am convinced at this point that this is being avoided because it's the most substantial decision that's been made about kratom in modern history. Modern history. I mean, recent, like in the past year, 2 years, 3 years. It's the most substantial decision that's been made. And it's all of the experts on drug dependence from around the world coming together and collectively saying, this is not worth our time. So, why is that being avoided here? Shouldn't people who believe in science be informed by the scientists, not the Ohio Board of Pharmacy, who is going off of 2017 to 2019 thoughts from the FDA? Because that's my conclusion from this article. They didn't have any original thoughts of their own. So I'm just, I'm waiting for the punchline here. I'm waiting for the World Health Organization to come in, and it doesn't. And it's too bad, because other than that, I feel like this article was pretty kicking, They had a bunch of different studies mentioned. They didn't cover up kratom in a negative fashion or positive fashion. They didn't, try and sweep anything under the rug. They didn't say that this Kratom Consumer Protection Act fell out of the sky and it's just happening and who knows why, and the FDA doesn't like it. They put in the process. They talked about how the legislators actually did their research in a time when right now you're hearing about all the polarization and how nobody's getting together and working across the aisle. This was a, not unanimous decision, but pretty darn close. Almost as close as you can get. And if that happens after these people are taking input from those who are producing Kratom, selling it, buying it, and, going to a facility, talking to people on the ground, you would think that that's fairly informed, right? So I like that they covered all this stuff. I think it's a shame they didn't mention the WHO decision. But that said, we must celebrate the good. So good job to the, what is it called? Good job to the Springfield News-Sun newspaper. I tip my hat to you for doing a somewhat okay, not too bad of a mediocre job of covering Kratom. And that's something to be celebrated. So champagne to everybody. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. There's my rant today. Sorry, I had to drag you all along. We'll be back tomorrow. All right. Take it easy, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.